Hey there, my name is Byers. I am a co-founder here at Aplo Group and oversee the paid ads team. And this is a quick update on iOS 14.5 attribution, kind of how we go about thinking about tracking revenue from different sales channels, and overall just how you can break down attribution from all the way on the acquisition side of the funnel all the way to retention. So the real answer to this is there's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's important to understand that attribution has always been an imperfect game. This has been true before iOS 14.5 and after. I'll give you an example. Pre-iOS 14.5, whenever everyone thought attribution was perfect or worked well, if you were to be an e-commerce business that ran Facebook ads, Google ads, maybe TikTok, Snapchat, Pinterest ads, whatever, and then you also have email through Klaviyo, and you have SMS through whatever platform, all these channels used something called full impact attribution, meaning they all have their attribution windows. Maybe it's 1 day, maybe it's 7 day, maybe it's 28 day, doesn't really matter. Regardless, if someone viewed or clicked within that window, 100% of the revenue from that sale that eventually happened, if that sale had that person do the event, the click or the view within the respective attribution window for any of these platforms, 100% of the sale value would be dedicated or reported back in that sales channel. So if you were to say, okay, I'm going to take all the revenue from Facebook, Google, a ton of mobile SMS, PostScript SMS, Klaviyo SMS, whatever, and Klaviyo email, and you added it all up, depending on your business, you would probably have much more revenue being reported in these advertising / sales channels than you actually have in your store, whether it be Shopify, BigCommerce, whatever. Important to understand just a general rule of thumb on this. Anything that's more complicated, more expensive, or with multiple products generally will have more touch points in order to complete the purchase, which then means there's going to be more overlap in attribution. If you're selling like a $10 trinket, the overlap won't be as noticeable, but this is just an example because in a lot of people's minds, iOS 14.5 was the fork in the road where now attribution doesn't make sense anymore. Attribution never really made sense anyways, and that's really important to understand. So attribution models are technically the way you're going to get the closest thing to real performance if you're trying to break down performance from each sales channel. However, even then, it doesn't necessarily matter, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. But first, kind of getting into some of these attribution types. So first click is going to do attribution to wherever the first click that was tracked came from. So a lot of people will use first click for paid acquisition because the logic there is that essentially as long as we can track that the first click came from paid ads, even if the last click before the purchase came from something else, the logic there is that we acquired the interest, we created demand for the product on the paid ad side. That's a very commonly used attribution type. Then there's modeled impact, which is personally my least favorite because, quite frankly, I don't think it makes sense for any of them. But it's commonly used by some digital marketers, so I'll explain why you might use it. Essentially, the way it works is you're going to break up attribution between multiple clicks. So let's say you have a very standard funnel. You have an ad, takes you to a landing page, which gives you a pop-up, which gives you an email. The email then gets you a conversion. You would consider weighting the impact on the conversion, say maybe 50% for the ad and 50% for the email, or any other arbitrary number you come up with. The reason why I don't like this is because it's arbitrary. You're effectively weighting things differently based off of what you feel it contributed. Data doesn't care about your feelings. It wants to have like a meaningful, logical reason for getting that attribution. Then there's full impact, which I've already mentioned. Regardless if it's the first click, the last click, it's going to get full impact attribution. This is what we personally recommend using for paid ads. First click does make sense, but there's another distinction to make here. UTMs are not great at keeping track of a user all the way through the journey if it's a long buying decision. First click is going to miss out on a lot of data. So what we recommend using is a third-party tool. There's many that will be used or that you can use. But full impact with, say, something like Wicked Reports, as long as it's a click, it will trace that user much more effectively than first click if the buying window takes a while. So if you're like a business or you're an e-commerce business and you're trying to say, okay, do I want to use first click Google UTMs or full impact with the third-party source? This is how I might recommend you decide this. if you have a very cheap product where on a last click basis, it is very comparable to your first click reported revenue or ROAS, then using Google's modeling is probably okay, because essentially the time window it takes to buy isn't big enough to make the data loss be meaningful. But if you have a longer purchasing cycle, more complicated product, higher value product, full impact is going to be more important. And one thing to keep in mind as well is if you're doing 50K a month, 100K a month, even 200K a month, data matters more on bigger scales. An extra 2% of performance doesn't really make that big of a difference if you're doing 50K in revenue a month. But if you're doing 5 million in revenue a month, maybe it matters a little bit more, right? So that's something to take into account too when it comes to investing in third-party tracking. And then last click is probably more accurate for, say, Klaviyo, SMS, whatever, because that's not really creating demand. It's more so nurturing demand that's already been created from paid ads and trying to get conversion immediately. So those are kind of the 4 main attribution types to understand. But if you're getting technical with it, it doesn't technically really matter, because at the end of the day, if you're truly trying to make a funnel that is as optimized as possible, you have to think about the funnel all the way from the first ad someone ever sees or the first interaction they have with your business, all the way to the conversion, number 1, and all the way through conversion 2, 3, 4, as many as you can humanly possibly make, right? So at the end of the day, all that really matters is full funnel ROAS or MER. 2 different ways of looking at it. Marketing efficiency ratio is what they teach in school. The way we operate at Aplo Group is generally a full funnel ROAS, and that's basically sales divided by blended ad spend, or all your ad spend combined. So any amount of ad dollars you are putting into Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, Google, you name it, that would be considered you sum that up, and that's your blended ad spend. And then sales divided by that is your blended ROAS. And once you have that, you can then start looking at your fixed costs and your variable costs to dictate, okay, at different amounts of spend, what are my KPIs I have to hit to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30%, whatever, profitable. And then you can operate off of, okay, I am going to keep spending money as long as I stay, say, X% profitable, and the full funnel ROAS KPI I have to achieve, whenever you look at economies of scale, whenever you start considering fixed costs, you are then able to say, okay, I want to keep spending more money because I want to be 10% profitable. I'm 12% profitable right now, spending $2,000 a day, and I have so much fixed cost that if I say increase my ad spend by 50%, the KPI I have to hit on a ROAS standpoint actually drops substantially. So that's one thing to keep in mind whenever you're deciding how much you should spend. Because now that Facebook and any of these social platforms are not reporting as much as they were before, you have to make decisions just on pure bottom line business metrics. Then the way you optimize an ad account, because Facebook data is no longer as trustworthy and the data integrity is quite a lot lower than it used to be, is you have to make your ad account optimization off of a mix of things. So again, that can be Facebook for a novice level advertiser. But if you really want to start getting more complex and make better decisions that actually equate to better bottom line and top line revenues, UTMs are definitely needed, both looking at last click and first click metrics. And then third-party tracking software for any business that's large and or has complex purchasing cycles. Well, you can essentially think of it as these 3 things combined create confluence to allow me to make the best decisions to where I allocate my budget, but not forgetting that the reported ROAS from all these channels are now effectively useless, and I have to start making my decisions on spend from a full funnel standpoint. Then, once again, the reason why you have to think about it this way is because Facebook and social ads, you can think as creating demand for the product, right? No one gets in your email funnel without the traffic that goes to your site. X% of people opt into your email list, X% of people opt into your SMS list. You can then calculate the value of an email. If you cut off your traffic source, email over time will deteriorate. So that's why email and text message marketing, the KPI you often set for either your in-house team, your freelancer, your agency, is I want you to achieve X% of revenue. And obviously it has to be rational, there has to be logic as to why you set that KPI. But that's why that channel doesn't deserve to get first click attribution, because it relies on paid social so much. And then then Google is a little bit more nuanced, because it depends how you structure your campaigns. But I'll say there's two campaign types that virtually all e-commerce businesses that have any amount of maturity have: branded search and shopping. So branded search, you can debate it. So if you look at your demand creation for your e-commerce business, a lot of people have like 95% demand creation from their social ads. Unless you have some sort of organic traffic source, you can then say, okay, I know that my Google account will not get, or my brand will not get searched if it's not for my Facebook ads. And generally speaking, when people search, they're probably seeing an ad, not clicking on it, then going and searching for my business or my product on Google. In that situation, once again, that's why it's okay to operate off of full funnel ROAS, because without Facebook, none of this actually will work anyways. So Facebook truly is the top line of demand creation. And then shopping's where it gets a little bit more complicated. I'm not going to get too much into the nuances there, but generally shopping has a mix of retargeting and prospecting built into one. So knowing that, at your own leisure, you should do some research into how you're breaking up your shopping campaigns from a targeting standpoint and deciding if that's still logical. But again, you can always then go back to using full impact or first click attribution for certain campaign types if you want. Long story short, just to reiterate again, all that really matters is your holistic business KPIs. If you're a business owner, if you're working with a freelancer, employee, agency, as long as the person running your ad accounts understand that the data inside of Facebook or whatever social platform you're advertising on is no longer as high quality as it used to be, and they understand they have to start taking data from other sources to decide how to allocate budget within the ad account, how to test, how to identify winners and losers. Once you are able to consistently do that, then you can then start making spend decisions off of holistic business KPIs. And just to reiterate as well, the problem with Facebook is, let's say, we all know it's underreporting for the most part, right? It's underreporting because it can't track as well as it used to. But even within the ad account itself, it's not reporting accurately inside of it. So one campaign that has a 2 ROAS and one that has a 1.8 ROAS, the one that has a 1.8 might actually have a 2.7 and the one that has a 2 might have a 1.3. That's why, that might be an over-exaggerated example, but it does still happen to that degree of that degree of inaccurate reporting, right? But that's why you have to take into account as many data points or as many reporting types as possible to kind of build a confluence that you are confident in saying, okay, 4 to 5 times this is doing better than this one here, so I'm pretty confident in saying we should allocate budget behind this. And again, once we're still only a few months into iOS 14.5. I know Facebook reporting has gotten better since day one of the rollouts, and I don't doubt it will continue to get better. And there also probably will be other ways of tracking things that come out in the weeks, months, days, whatever to come. But at the end of the day, all we have to do is understand full funnel ROAS and continue optimizing to get as much data as possible to make better decisions. But I hope this was helpful, and thank you.